Hey everyone, Nate here. It's been a while since I've actually sat down and given a proper update on Nexus Productions, and there's quite a lot happening behind the scenes. So now that a pretty major rebuild of Nexus is wrapping up, I figured this was probably the best time to explain where everything actually stands, what we're working on, what's been happening with some of the series that have been a little quiet. Before I get into the actual series and stuff, Nexus itself has actually changed quite a bit in the past year. We spent a lot of time rebuilding the Discord, cleaning up how the team works, and redoing applications and casting, reorganizing production stuff, and generally fixing a lot of things that I've learned from during our first year. And obviously, we have finally have the new Nexus Productions logo and identity. Nexus has really only been operating for around a year, so a lot of that first year was us figuring out what worked and what definitely didn't. I don't want Nexus to become this giant pile of systems and documents that gets in the way of actually making things. The whole point of the rebuild was to give the projects a better foundation underneath. And that brings us to the stuff people probably care about more. Starting with the big one, Multiversal Adventures. Yes, it is still happening. MA has been going through some pretty massive overhauls behind the scenes. I've been going back through the story, characters, lore, locations, and basically the entire foundation of the series instead of just rushing straight into making episodes. Multiversal Adventures is still one of the major projects I want Nexus to be known for. The difference now is that I am a lot less interested in rushing out an episode 1 just so I can say the series has started. I'd rather spend more time making the foundation actually work than get several episodes in and we realize we built the entire thing around problems that should have probably been fixed at the beginning. So, MA is in active status, and there's a lot happening with it. I'm just deliberately not giving it some random release date yet. When we have something that is actually ready enough to show properly, then I want to start showing you more of it. But yes, Multiversal Adventures is actually moving forward now. Hooray! Multiversal Adventures isn't the only big series we're working on, though. There is actually another project that I haven't properly announced on this channel yet. A new FNaF series is on the way! And no, it's not Echoes of Agony. We'll get to that one a little later. This is Fazbear Origins. It's a new series built around the earlier years of the FNaF story. Fredbears, the beginning of Freddy's, the children behind the animatronics, and the events that eventually turned this world into the FNaF story we already know. One of the biggest things I want to do differently with this series is actually spend time with that world before everything goes wrong. I want Fredbear's to feel like a real place people have actually enjoyed going to, and I want these kids to actually feel like kids, not just names attached to the animatronics because we already know what eventually happens to them. The big lens of Fazbear Origins is really the origins of the animatronics themselves, especially the kids behind Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, along with Cassidy and Golden Freddy, and how all these characters eventually become the haunted animatronics we're familiar with. So obviously, the human characters matter a lot, but we're following this history largely through the characters who eventually become the heart of Freddy's. And that's actually one of the biggest differences between Fazbear Origins and Echoes of Agony. They're both FNaF stories, but they're approaching the world from pretty different angles. Fazbear Origins is much more about the animatronics and the kids and where they came from, like the children behind them, the restaurants, and the events that created the haunted Fazbear world. Well, Echoes of Agony is much more interested in the people living throughout that history, and the consequences all of this has on them. And because of that, I don't want Fazbear Origins to start with everything already being miserable. There should be normal days, friendships, arguments, birthdays, family stuff, and kids just messing around at Fredbear's. Because it's an actual life there. Because if we're eventually going to take that world away from them, I want the audience to understand what was actually lost. Right now, we're still doing a lot of work on Season 1. We've been tightening the overall story, rebuilding some of the characters and major events, and cutting down some of the unnecessary complexity from older versions of the project. The goal is to make something ambitious, but we're also trying to make something we can actually film. We're also planning to start relatively small, rather than immediately committing ourselves to producing an entire huge season at once. First few episodes are probably going to help us prove that the format, cast, and production process actually works. And if that goes well, then we'll keep building from there. So, yeah, Fazbear Origins is officially happening. It's one of the main productions we want moving alongside Multiversal Adventures, and I'm really excited to finally start talking about this one publicly. But I did mention another FNaF series a minute ago that was kind of our original flagship series. And now we need to talk about the hard part. Echoes of Agony. Especially because if you've been following us for a while, you probably remember that EOA was originally supposed to be our main flagship series. Before Multiversal Adventures took that position, Echoes of Agony was basically the project Nexus was being built around. So obviously, something changed. I don't really want to get into the private behind-the-scenes details, but there were some issues behind the scenes that eventually forced me to take a pretty serious look at Nexus itself, how it was structured, how we were working, and where everything was actually heading. And that ended up becoming one of the big reasons why Nexus went through the restructure I've been talking about in this video. During that process, I also had to rethink which project actually made the most sense to lead Nexus going forward. Multiversal Adventures had always had a foundation that I felt much more confident actively building on, and over time it naturally became the new flagship project. That wasn't me deciding that Echoes of Agony suddenly didn't matter anymore. It was more so that I wasn't comfortable continuing to push EOA forward without first going back and figuring out whether its own foundations still work. And that's basically how EOA ended up to where it is now. It's currently what I'm calling a semi-hold. I'm not announcing that it's cancelled, it definitely isn't. But I'm not also going to pretend everything is fine and push it straight back into production just because it used to be our flagship series. Right now, I'm going back through the project, basically, like the entire thing. The scripts, the lore, the characters, structure, and really the identity of the series itself. I want to figure out what genuinely still works, what needs to be rebuilt, and whether there's a version of Echoes of Agony that I'm actually excited and confident about enough to make. And if EOA does continue, I still want it to have a very different reason to exist from Fazbear Origins. Fazbear Origins is looking at FNaF largely through the origins of the animatronics, the children behind them, the restaurants, and how that haunted world actually forms. Echoes of Agony is much more about the people living through the FNaF story and the damage that was eventually behind. So I don't see them as two versions of the same show. But even if the audit goes really well, EOA probably wouldn't jump straight back into full production. Multiversal Adventures is already a massive long-form project, and Echoes of Agony is another massive long-form project. And trying to run both of those at full speed while also developing Fazbear Origins sounds like a really good way of trying to burn myself and everyone else out. That's actually one of the biggest things I'm trying to change about Nexus right now. I don't want our measure of success to be how many giant projects we can announce. I'd rather have a smaller number of productions that are actually healthy, actually moving, and actually capable of being finished. So if Echoes of Agony does come back, which it probably will, I want it to come back because we found the right version of it, and because we're actually ready to make it. So that's where things stand right now. Multiversal Adventures is our current flagship and is moving forward. Fazbear Origins is officially in development. Echoes of Agony is being reevaluated, and hopefully I'll have a much clearer answer about its future once that process is finished. And with Nexus itself now on a much stronger foundation, the goal from here is pretty simple. Actually making the stuff. There will still be active development updates, casting announcements, behind-the-scenes things, and probably plenty more changes as we keep learning things. But hopefully you'll start seeing a lot less of Nexus rebuilding itself and a lot more of what Nexus was rebuilt to create. So thanks for sticking around, and if you want to join the Discord, we'll be happy to talk with you about stuff. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. And remember, we always build stories, block by block.